the Tory party conference has a problem. No one gives a damn about it. The party is polling at 16%, and if there was an election tomorrow, they'd be completely wiped out. So how have they tried to garner headlines anyway? Well, they proposed a UK ICE. The party has pledged £1.6 billion towards their ICE-style removals force to deport 150,000 illegal migrants every year. And once they're detained, Kemi Badenoch doesn't care where they go.
They will go back to where they came from. That's what they need to do. We cannot have a situation where we can't deport people and say, well, we don't know where they go, so they can just stay here. That is basically inviting every single person across the world to our shores because we don't know where they would go afterwards.
So you think
this is a fatalistic and defeatist attitude, and I will not have that.
Now, the idea migrants will be sent out of the UK whether or not their home country is safe. And that's just a repeat of something Nigel Farage said earlier this summer. And the clamouring for a UK-style ICE is also an echo of Reform. So in August, after Reform announced their plans to deport 600,000 people, Zia Youssef bragged to The Times that Reform's plans will be like Trump 2.0. So what would it mean to be like Trump 2.0? And well, in terms of controlling borders, Trump has pretty much done what he'd said he'd do. He's ramped up the militarization of the southern border, and there are now record lows crossing into the US from Mexico. And there's a peak of 250,000 people a month crossing under Biden in December 2023. Less than 9,000 people were apprehended in April this year. Now, that change has been relatively popular, with 60% of Americans telling pollsters they approved of Trump's border policies in June. But Kemi Badenoch has specifically said the Tories want to copy Trump on ICE. So not on the border, but on ICE. Now, that has been a far more controversial policy. You'll remember the protests in LA in the summer over ICE raids at workplaces there. Well, that conflict has now moved to Chicago.
For weeks now, armed federal agents, some in full tactical gear, have been patrolling downtown Chicago, and new clashes have broken out mostly outside the suburban ICE facility, but also spilling into neighborhoods, hospitals, even outside schools. Operation Midway Blitz, as it's been called, has turned more aggressive, with ICE agents conducting overnight raids of apartments, leaving residents shaken in many cases. Each weekend, protesters have taken to the streets, and confrontations with ICE agents, some in masks, have become more intense, with the use of tear gas, pepper balls, and rubber bullets.
Now, the fact that ICE agents have their faces covered makes them look especially thuggish when they're just sort of apprehending, grabbing people in the street. This clip of ICE agents in downtown Chicago went viral this weekend. Now, if you're listening to that on the podcast, that was two ICE agents, one of them in uniform, one of them in plain clothes. Both of them had their faces covered, one with balaclavas, one with a scarf, and they were putting a man in a headlock in the middle of a busy road. The man looked to be of Latino origin. The man would go on to be de-arrested by passers-by.
Get the fuck out of here! Let me see your fucking face, bro! Let him go!
So again, if you're listening on the podcast, what you saw there was those two masked ICE thugs, essentially loads of people in the street sort of saying, what the hell are you doing? Coming or trying to come in between them and the man they were detaining, pulling down their scarves. And it was especially when one of the ICE agents lost his glasses that they seemed to freak out and decided that this wasn't for them. They got back in the car and drove off. So the man was free. And it leaves, I think, ICE agents looking terrifying and pathetic. And this was another viral video which made ICE look both terrifying and pathetic at the same time.
Get him! Watch out! Watch out!
Now, again, for those listening on the podcast, that was a bunch of militarized ICE agents in Chicago chasing a delivery driver who'd dropped his phone. He got away. I mean, unlike the policies on the border, this thuggery is not a political winner for Trump, as was explained by this very animated pollster on CNN.
Look at ICE approval. All right, ICE's net popularity rating. You know, in Trump's first term, it was at 0 points. Not too great, but not too bad either. But take a look now. Look at this. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that agency, look at that. Minus 14 points. Down it goes because of their actions during the second Trump term. In fact, the Pew Research Center polled 16 different agencies. ICE's net popularity rating was 15th out of 16th. It was close to being the least popular of all. This bottom line is, John, the president may think this is a politically winning issue for him, but the numbers tell a very different story. It's, in fact, a political loser.
Ash. Obviously, the British right see lots of opportunities when it comes to migration, especially when it comes to the boats, for example. They think that's an issue that can get them back into power. Maybe not the Tories, but Reform certainly do. This move to try and copy ICE, though, is that, own goal, morally and politically?
Well, in terms of the British right, one of the things that they're going to have to reckon with is that the kind of masked thuggery that defines ICE operations in the second Trump administration is totally antithetical with at least the purported tradition of British policing. Now, obviously, if you expand out a bit from simply looking at bobbies on the beat, you look at some of the worst behaviour of the TSG, which is a particular public order of the Metropolitan Police, or indeed you look at the policing in Northern Ireland, you would see that this kind of benign image hasn't always stood up to scrutiny. But I think that's different from having a nationwide essentially, militarized police force across the country. I mean, part of the reason why, Northern Ireland, the policing was so violent and was so militarized was because there was something of a veil of silence drawn around it by, much of the media that was operating out of England. You can't do that if you've got your masked thugs terrorising Manchester, Birmingham, Bradford, Bristol, and parts of London as well. I mean, one of the things that I suppose I'd like to draw your attention to, because this is something that the likes of Reform and their sort of valorization of Doge and Elon Musk's early cost-cutting efforts, and for those listening to the podcast, I was doing, scare quotes, is that the Trump administration has proposed an increase to ICE's budget that's tenfold, right? So 10 times more than its existing budget. There's $30 billion pumped into the recruitment drive alone, because what they want is to have 10,000 extra ICE officers recruited by the end of the year. The proposed ICE budget is $76 billion. I mean, these are vast sums of money. And the reason why they're spending so much money on it is because it is actually really quite difficult to recruit people to effectively terrorize the places where they live. So you've had to have all these inducements. So, benefits, healthcare, et cetera, but also things like, up to $50,000 as a sign-up bonus for new recruits. The ad spend for ICE is absolutely enormous, something like $5.7 million in television advertising, which is targeting America's metropolitan areas. So cities like Atlanta, Seattle, Boston, Chicago. Many of these are cities where, at least on the local municipal level, there have either been, city council motions or mayoral pledges to limit cooperation with ICE, and outside of when it's legally mandated. So you have to pour an awful lot of money into advertising for recruits, and you have to have inducements for signing them up. So it costs an awful lot of money. I think that's part of the Trump strategy, which is also, if you're gutting, federal jobs elsewhere, and you're gutting budgets for aspects of law enforcement elsewhere as well. City budgets are finding themselves cut. Then that's something which can be a bit of a push factor into these ICE jobs. But I think that's a question that Richard Tice, Nigel Farage, Zia Youssef, they're not likely to engage with it an awful lot. They'll probably just give the same rote answer of being like, "Oh, we're going to redirect money from DEI and translators." You're not going to find the money from DEI and translators for what is essentially a nationwide paramilitary force.
I think the Tories say they're going to pay for this by shutting like the hotels. They're expensive, right? I think it's $6 billion a year, but the NHS is over $200 billion a year. So this idea that you can just cut unpopular things and save money is like, most money goes on popular things, pensions, the NHS. So that's why I suppose, when I was asking you about France, I just feel like we're going to go round and round and round where the centrists fail, the populist right get in, they say they're going to cut waste and it's going to be fine, and then they also mess up. Then maybe that does mean that it will swing round to the left and they can have a go. I was chatting to someone the other day who's sort of doing a left-wing social policy person, and they were saying, it feels like this is a bit out of vogue now because there aren't so many left-wing sort of parties that look like they're about to get into power in the UK especially. And I was saying, no one's got a model that works, which means that people are going to be grabbing around for different ideas for a while now, I think.